It's another Sunday afternoon, so you know what that means. It's Rising Q's time.
Indeed. All right, so first up, we've got a question from Jay Zeitlin36.
Yes.
Which Democratic ticket would you be most intrigued by? Saagar, what do you think?
I've been giving this one some thought, and I think it would be any of the cross ideology ones, right? So like a Biden Warren or a Bernie Biden. Yeah, I think those are most interesting because it's like, how can they reconcile? Like, look, politically could actually be the smartest thing to do, but I would be most intrigued by it because I wouldn't know how they could possibly reconcile their dueling visions. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like Donald Trump and Mike Pence, right? Like you couldn't find two more people who
Mike
are
Pence
ideologically
is just
opposed.
Subservient.
Right, but that's actually intriguing. I mean, that was part of the story. I would wonder like who would be subservient to who, like what the battles would play out. So that's kind of how I see it.
I think it could be really interesting to put Bernie and Yang together because clearly they have a lot of the same sort of analysis of the problems in America and then come to different places in terms of both the solutions but also how possible it is to sort of change the trajectory. They also share, and this is something I've actually been wanting to dig more into and may do this next week, but they share an overlap in terms of their voters. They're the only two candidates in the race who really have much crossover vote from Trump voters, which I also think is really interesting and makes a compelling case for the two of them together in terms of electability. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, so the second question that we have from Ben Weinberg. What's the most effective use of Omar, AOC, and Tlaib on the trail? Assume targeted get-out-the-vote locations, but are they most effective together? Specific places most likely to be effective. Their voices have to be leveraged effectively to recreate 2015 energy, which is doable. What do you think, Krystal?
All right, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. This is another one that it may be worth digging more into, but I think there are two questions. There's one, just the pure, which is the question that's being asked, the pure campaign question. Like, what's going to be the best thing to get the most voters enthused? And I think young people are the obvious, going to college campuses, going to younger communities of color, working class communities of color, like that seems to me like the obvious thing. I think you could do, the squad together is very powerful on their own. They also, have their own resonance. AOC certainly has just her own massive grassroots following that she could take basically wherever she goes. But there's a bigger movement question too. A lot of sort of like white feminists were very confused by AOC's endorsement of Bernie because they were, they liked her because she was a young woman of color who beat the old white guy. And that's what they were there for, without really understanding the populist working class movement that she represents. So I would love to see AOC and Omar and Tlaib in like rural American working class communities, right? In places where you don't necessarily expect them, because I think that there would be a lot more resonance there than the media would necessarily expect. And it would help people put together that, no, this isn't just about like a quote unquote urban movement, which I find that language very troubling, but it's not just about like urban working class and over here is rural working class. This is about one movement, cross-racial, cross-urban, rural. To me, that would be very exciting to see, and I think those women could sort of make the case in very explicit and obvious and sort of visual ways that maybe others couldn't.
That's interesting.
So last question we have here from a grad student. If you guys were asked to be debate moderators for one of these debates, how would you approach them, Saagar?
Oh, I would love to be a debate moderator, especially because I've trashed all the other debate moderators. So I definitely have to bring my game. Yeah. No, what I would do is I would focus it kind of exactly how we saw in that Yang section, with the most substantive section that we saw on the CNN debate about UBI versus federal jobs guarantee, and do it so that have each of the candidates talk about some of the the big things that are actually facing the country. So the urban rural divide, about class differences, about your proposals on healthcare, and instead of taxes, blah blah blah, be like, what's your specific diagnosis of the problem? Not who are you friends with and how did that change your life? I would go through each one of these different policy issues and I'd actually line up the ones who are most ideologically opposed, and most important of all, time. Not everybody has to get in on every single issue. Some people are leaders on different things. So if we gave just the same amount of time, except to 2 or 3 different candidates instead of all 12.
Yeah.
And then let people get in and really talk it out.
I think
that's how I would do it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. you have these, like the CNN debate this week, they focused so much on these questions where everybody agreed, like impeachment.
They're like, yeah, impeach,
sure,
go ahead.
Important,
Right.
but everybody literally agrees on this. So what are you getting out of this? Friendship, like what are we learning with this,
Nothing.
really?
Right.
You know, and then another portion was basically the same questions on Medicare for all that have literally been asked every debate. Like, okay, healthcare, incredibly important, but either go at it in a different way and ask some different questions, or or focus on the many other things that there are also are to talk about. I mean, there was no discussion of climate change, no discussion of immigration, no discussion, importantly, and I think this is maybe a place to focus on as well, the theory of political change. Who is your coalition? What is the history of change in this country that you subscribe to?
I mean, a real foreign policy, not Russia, Putin, that's so 2012. I mean, China, Africa. I mean, there's so much more that we could talk about. And, frankly, most of these candidates, we don't know where they stand on Afghanistan. Everybody's like, yeah, we should get out. How are we going to get out? That's one of your most important jobs.
Are you going to work with the Taliban? What does that look like?
Exactly. Do you support peace negotiations? I mean, these are all such important questions, and they just don't cover any of it. So that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, and I mean, another area that I think we haven't delved much into is exactly the stances on criminal justice, the war on drugs, what your view is on how that connects to addiction. Everybody just sort of says, yeah, we should end the war on drugs, but they actually mean very, very different things by saying that, and that's never been sussed out. So thank you for that question. We enjoyed digging into it. We have many thoughts, yes. And thank you all for all of your questions. Thank you for watching. Make sure if you haven't subscribed yet that you do that.
Hit it now.
Yep, click the bell so you get the notifications. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
See you guys tomorrow.